Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, The Man Crisis. Learn why so many men are struggling to find their way in an increasingly gynocentric world in The Man Crisis. Get your copy of The Man Crisis in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. This Saturday, we had another tragic mass shooting in El Paso, Texas, when Patrick Chrysius, a 21-year-old man, decided to drive 9 hours to El Paso to a Walmart to murder Mexicans and Hispanics in an effort to stop so-called race mixing and to stop Hispanics from replacing whites. And when I take a critical examination of your Patrick Chrysius, I see yet another individual who fits right in line with the pattern and profile I talked about in my book, The Man Crisis. And when I take that critical examination of Patrick Chrysius, I see a beta male who fits right in line with the pattern and profile I talk about in The Man Crisis. Now, your Patrick Chrysius clearly does come from a single mother household, I believe, because this 21-year-old man who was sitting in his mother's house for 4 years would not be able to do that in a home with a father in it. Because any home with a father in it, that father would be insisting that this 21-year-old man get up off of his butt and go to work, because that's what fathers would insist their sons do, because they want to teach their sons male life skills at an early age, and part of his male development would be learning how to get out there and work. But because your Patrick Chrysius grew up in a single mother household, I believe this is why he was able to do things like write on LinkedIn that he had no ambition, no interest in working, and was sitting there believing that he was in computer science because he could sit there and be on the internet for 8 hours a day. Now, that would not go on in a home with a father in it, because a father, again, if he's paying the bills for that internet, he is going to insist that his son limit his hours on that internet. And if he's spending hours on that internet, he better be working on some sort of enterprise to bring money into the home and be able to take care of himself. But because I believe this Patrick Chrysius grew up in a single mother household, his mother enabled him to remain in the home after graduating high school and dropping out of college, giving him a complete pass for his irresponsible behavior, because in most cases with single mothers, they give boys passes to participate in irresponsible behavior because they want to coddle them. And I clearly see how this Patrick Chrysius was a coddled beta male. And because this beta male never learned male life skills, this is why he was sitting there on the internet imbibing all of this white racist, white supremacist, and white nationalist media. And because he was sitting there imbibing all of this white racist, white supremacist, and white nationalist media, he began to buy into these ideas regarding white supremacy. And he also had the time to sit there and write this manifesto, which is chock filled with misinformation, this The Inconvenient Truth, a manifesto. After I read it, I could easily deconstruct and I could easily refute. Now, your Patrick Chrysius says his motivations for participating in the murders at this Walmart were due to the so-called Hispanic invasion of Texas, and he calls the Hispanics instigators. Now, when I take a critical look at that argument, it is so easy to refute, it's not funny. Any American who knows American history knows there is no Hispanic invasion of Texas, because when it comes down to your Texas, when it originally was before a part of America, before Texas was a part of America, Texas was part of the Spanish colonies, and it was run by Spaniards. So Texas has always had a large Hispanic population. Moreover, it has always had a large indigenous Mexican population because, again, it was a colony of Spain, and it was filled with not only Spaniards and the descendants of Spaniards, but it was also filled with the descendants of indigenous Mexicans. So his argument right there falls apart right in the first paragraph, and you can easily refute that with a simple 7th or 8th grade American history book that would tell you that this man's whole argument falls completely apart. So he's sitting there talking about how he supports the Christchurch shooter and how he wants to stop this Hispanic invasion of Texas. And again, Hispanics have always been a part of Texas, and they have always been there since day one, even before Texas became a part of the United States. Because when the Texas annexation transpired in 1845, it was Mexicans who also helped with the annexation with guys like Sam Houston, and it was also they were fighting against Spaniards again, and the pushing it away from Spain. So Hispanics were a part of the culture from the beginning. So he's sitting there talking about things, and he doesn't really know his American history, and he sits there and talks about how the Hispanic community is part of this so-called Great Replacement. Again, another illogical argument that could easily be deconstructed and refuted by anyone who can really understands economics. Because he talks about this Great Replacement, but when it comes down to it, it's white men who control most of these major corporations, and it is white men who go out of their way to hire white women and other minorities, and it is white men who are the ones in charge. So he's sitting there getting mad at Hispanics, when in actuality his issue is with white people. But like most white racists and white nationalists, this beta male doesn't have the backbone or the stones to confront the rich white people, because he has a covert contract where he'll sit there and he will blame the Hispanics, the blacks, and any other minorities that he believes is the ones that are going to replace him, because he actually wants to go out of his way to replace the rich white people. But that's where we start to see where the rose-colored glasses are on for this beta male, because how can he replace any white people if he doesn't want to do any work? And this is par for the course with your beta males who write these manifestos. The reason why they write these manifestos is because they see the world through rose-colored glasses. And the reason why they see the world through rose-colored glasses is because they have been raised in these single mother households. And because they have been raised in these single mother households, they have learned feminine perspective, female life skills, and female survival skills. So they have not gone out into the real world. They have not experienced the real world. And they see the world not from the real perspective that men see it, but they see it from the perspective that females see it. And when I read your Patrick Chrysius's manifesto, it comes from the perspective of a man who comes from a female perspective, a picture that looks like our real world, but is completely distorted, and his perceptions about these issues are completely distorted by his feminine perspective. He's sitting there writing this whole manifesto out of emotion without any sort of concrete facts to back up his so-called anti-immigrant arguments. And his anti-immigrant arguments, again, can easily be deconstructed and completely refuted. And he's sitting there fearing that increasing Hispanic population will soon make Texas a Democratic state. However, if this man had any sort of logic and reason, he would have seen that 30% of Hispanic men and 30% of Hispanic women voted for President Trump. And in most cases, many Hispanics see themselves as white, and many Hispanics, all Americans, once they have the second generation, they will go out and vote Republican. Unfortunately, because this beta male is only seeing the world through rose-colored glasses, he can't see the reality of Hispanics who are now forming white supremacist groups or forming parts of so-called Mexican Nazis. But again, this is his narrow-minded, rose-colored perspective of the world. And again, it can easily be deconstructed once you read his manifesto and read all of the fundamental flaws in his argument. And he says this was his motivation for participating in this mass shooting, and that he needed to participate in this mass shooting in order to stop the so-called race mixing between Hispanics and whites. And again, once you take those arguments completely apart, you can find all of the holes in them, because all of this so-called race mixing that your Patrick Chrysius talks about, all of that race mixing was initiated by white men in America. Because if you study American history, all of the race mixing, whether it be with indigenous Native Americans, African slaves, or your Mexicans who were another indigenous Indians, all of that was initiated by white men. Because when it came down to it, if a Native American man, a black man, or a indigenous Mexican man were to even think about looking at a white woman, he could have been murdered or castrated back in the days of the colonial periods here in America. But because your Patrick Chrysius is a beta male, and beta males do things based on feelings and not facts, he goes on in these emotional arguments talking about race mixing, when again, the persons who did most of the race mixing and initiated most of the race mixing here in America, they were primarily white men. So he's sitting there making this argument about protecting the so-called white race, when in actuality it was the white race that was the one who initiated most of the race mixing. And again, I looked at that argument and I could just tear it apart very simply, because anybody who does research on American history knows that this is the core reason why we have so-called race mixing. Now, this same Patrick Chrysius again goes on in his manifesto to talk about how there aren't going to be any jobs and automation, but again, this was done by white men. So he's sitting there blaming everybody for problems, but never wanting to take a look in the mirror. So this is the textbook of a beta male. Beta males, whenever they want to sit there and rant and complain about problems, but they don't want to see that they are the core reason for their problems, nor do they want to work on any sort of solution, because these men, they again live in a world of rose-colored glasses. They don't live in reality, and they don't want to take any responsibility. This individual was looking to use excuses to avoid taking responsibility in his own life. So he comes up talking about how everything has to do with all of these things as related to Hispanics, as related to so-called Mexicans. Everything is about somebody else, but never once is it about him, and never once is it about him taking responsibility as a man. So when I look at his behavior, again, he's sitting there talking about all this stuff in his manifesto, yet this same individual who complains about race mixing and all of these other things going on, when it's time for him to go out here and go get a job, He can't do that. And again, the real reason why he can't do that has to do with that single mother household he was raised in and the fact that he learned no male life skills. He can look at the world and talk about the problems in the world, but he won't focus on him and where he relates to everything. It's always about somebody else. And this is a textbook trait of beta males. They always look at the other man, but never take that minute to do any sort of self-examination and see where the person who is responsible for them is them and how they need to take responsibility for their state of life. He's sitting there talking about Hispanics when he needs to be focused on himself, because here you have again a man who for the last 4 years in an up economy has every option and opportunity to go out here and find a job, and he doesn't do that, no, because his single mother enables him to sit at home on the internet for 8 hours a day instead of insisting like a father would that he get up off of his butt and go out here and apply for one of these jobs, or if he's on that internet all day, to be out here looking for full-time work. That's what a man would insist of a boy, but when you have boys raised primarily in these single mother households, no one insists that this boy meet any sort of standard for manhood, because most women do not know how to raise boys to be men. Now, in the aftermath of this recent mass shooting, you have a whole host of people on the left and on the right making excuses, and the same old excuses over and over again. And these excuses can easily be refuted, because you have people now making the same old gun control debate. And again, this is not about gun control, because your Patrick Chrysius bought his weapons legally, and that shows that this is not a gun control issue. This is a self-control issue, and it's a self-control issue because this boy was never taught self-control in his single mother household. And because he was not taught discipline and self-control, this is why he was caught up in his emotions and decided to act impulsively and participate in this mass shooting, not thinking once about the consequences of his actions. All he was doing was feeling regarding Hispanics and so-called race mixing, but he was not thinking about any of these consequences critically. So this beta male, he was just out here with these guns, and again, you can file all the laws you want regarding gun control. It would not stop any of these new mass shooters, because these new mass shooters, again, bought all of their weapons legally. So this is not a gun control issue. What the real issue is, as related to this, has to do with the family. Unfortunately, we have people making efforts to deflect it because no one wants to hold the white female accountable for the sad state of affairs as related to the American family. And if you do the critical research like I have for books like The Man Crisis, you can clearly see where this uptick in mass shootings correlate with. This uptick in mass shootings does not correlate with the proliferation of guns. It correlates with the rise of the white feminist movement, the implementation of the no-fault divorce in the 1970s, and the rise in single mother households from out-of-wedlock births and from divorce. And because we've had this rise in single mother households, we have started to see an increase in mass shootings. So all you have to do is do the research on the statistical data, and you will see that everything connects as related to these mass shootings. Because with the first real major mass shooting in 1984, we start to see this pattern emerge, and then in the 1990s, the pattern really starts to form because that's when we start to see all of these boys who grew up in these homes from divorce and single mothers starting to grow up. And a lot of these boys, as they're entering into adolescence, are filled with anger, they're filled with rage, they're frustrated about trying to navigate a course in a world they don't know anything about or understand. And because these men are simmering and boiling in anger, this is what has led to this explosion of violence ever since the start of the 1990s and continues to ramp up into the 2010s. And now we're starting to see almost a mass shooting almost every day or every other day, because we've had 250 mass shootings this year, and that's almost one mass shooting a day. And when you really think about it, because this is what's happening, is these boys who are growing up in these single mother households or these households where they have these beta male fathers, these men do not know how to be men. They do not know how to navigate a course in the world as men. They do not know how to function in the world of men. And because they do not have the male life skills or male survival skills to make a living for themselves, set a course for themselves, set a direction for themselves, this is why these men are becoming frustrated. This is why these men are becoming angry. And this is why these men are going out here looking to destroy the world around them, because they don't know how to make life in the world work for them. Now, you've had people like your President Donald Trump going out of their way to say that this has to do with mental illness. However, I have done the research, and none of these mass shooters are mentally ill. When it comes down to this Patrick Chrysius is clearly of a sound mind. Now, most people will look at his manifesto and say, oh, this man is crazy, but no, this man is not crazy at all. He sees the world from rose-colored glasses, and again, that's a reality that was enabled by his single mother, not something that he would learn from living with a father. When it comes down to most boys, the mothers go out of their way to protect the boys from reality, and that's what makes people think that these boys are mentally ill, when in actuality it is the mother coddling the boy so that he won't learn how to function in the world of men. So it is the single mother's enabling that leads to these beta males going out here and participating in these acts of violence, because they enable this boy to remain sheltered and not deal with reality. And that's clear from Patrick Chrysius's background, from the way I see it, because, again, no home with a real father in it is going to let that boy sit there in that home at 18 years old, finishing high school, and just sit there and write an arrogant LinkedIn profile where he talks about how he doesn't want to work, how he's not looking for work. No father is going to allow his son to be sitting in his home and doing and being like that in his home. No father is going to allow that, but a mother or a beta male father will allow that, because they often want to give the boy a pass for his behaviors, and they want to call themselves sheltering and protecting the boy, not knowing that you're making the boy far more dysfunctional by going out of your way to protect the boy. So this boy is not mentally ill. What it is he's not prepared for the world of manhood, and he's not prepared for the world of men. So the real problem with these mass shooters has nothing to do with gun control, has nothing to do with mental illness. It has to do with the way we are raising boys here in America. And the way we have been raising boys here in America has been dysfunctional for the last 50 years. And the reason why it's been dysfunctional is because we have listened to these white feminists who told us that we did not need to have a father in the home, and that because we did not need to have a father in the home, a woman could go out of her way to raise a boy to be a man. And it's this lie that has led to so many boys winding up being dysfunctional, because in order for a boy to learn how to be a man, he needs to learn male life skills from his father, because his father is the only man who knows how to teach him how to survive in the world, because he's had to survive in the world and he knows what a boy needs to know. However, your feminist has brought up this notion, demonizing men and telling boys that men are bad and that boys don't need to learn how to be men from men. They need to learn how to be men from women. And what's happening is that because we've had 2 to 3 generations of these boys learning how to be men from women, this is why these boys are becoming frustrated. This is why these boys are becoming angry. This is why these boys are simmering and boiling in anger. And this is why these boys are believing that they are justified in participating in these acts of violence when they explode in rage, and looking to use things like these manifestos to justify their acts of violence. So I see where the real problem lies. Unfortunately, most people want to deflect from where the problem lies, because in gynocentric America, most American men do not want to confront women and hold them accountable for the way they have been raising boys to grow up dysfunctional, because many of these boys who grew up in these single mother households and these beta males out here, these men don't want to hold women accountable because they have a couple of covert contracts. And the first covert contract that these beta males have is they believe if they don't hold the woman accountable for the way they have raised the son, they believe they will get an if they confront her, they won't get any opportunities at sex. However, what happens is when you don't confront the woman, you give her a pass that enables her to keep participating in this dysfunctional way that she's raising the boy. So a lot of these guys, they fear that if they hold this woman accountable for the way she's raising his son, she will deny him opportunities at sex. However, what will happen is when a man confronts a woman is she will be grateful for it, but you can't tell that to the gynocentric man. He thinks he's going to benefit by giving her a pass for messing up her son. Now, the second covert contract these beta males have is they believe that if they give her a pass, they will be able to continue perpetuating white supremacy. Now, many of these women, they benefit under feminism, and again, they, as the first teacher of culture, what they do is teach white supremacy to their sons, like this white supremacist terrorist was learning. And again, his foundation in white supremacy was not just those websites, it was taught to him by his mother in that home. So many of these white supremacists, again, that they want to do is make it all about gun control or mental illness to deflect from holding the woman accountable, because they want to have a covert contract where they can continue teaching white supremacy to their sons, like this Patrick Chrysius, and they want to be able to continue getting a pass to continue teaching white supremacy. So you'll see many on the far left and many on the far right continuing to talk about gun control and mental illness to deflect, because they don't want us looking at that white woman who is the one who is this white male's first teacher of culture, and the one woman who teaches him racism and white supremacy from the first day he is born. That's the person who they don't want us looking at, and that's why they have guys like Donald Trump coming out to be buffers out here, because when you have the white male as the buffer, most people are looking at the white man and never taking that look at that white woman and that household where this white supremacist learned this white supremacist culture and learned these white supremacist and racist ideals. That's what white supremacists don't want you looking at. So they go out here and get a man like Donald Trump to come out here and be the buffer, and he keeps you looking at him and getting emotional at him, but you're never looking at that white woman who is raising these boys in white supremacy and creating and crafting these race soldiers in her home. Now, these beta males, again, they come from these single mother households. And again, this is where they cultivate these ideas and this culture. And this is something most people don't want to confront because, again, they have a covert contract where they don't want to confront this white woman who is the one raising these boys to be dysfunctional. Because it is, again, all of this dysfunction comes from the white feminist movement of the 1960s, and it comes from the no-fault divorce of the 1970s, which established the single mother household, established the beta male, and socially engineered the beta males like this Patrick Chrysius. Males who never learned male life skills, men who learned how to submit to female authority, and men who have no real interest in participating in society because they are every inch of female on the inside, even though they are male on the outside. And again, that showed from the way this beta male behaved, because he's sitting there again putting up a LinkedIn profile to talk about how he doesn't want to work and how he's on the internet all day. And again, if there were a father in the home, he would have demanded this boy go to work. He would have gotten him a job, and he would have demanded that he help start paying bills in the home. That's what a father would have done. Unfortunately, because this boy did not have a father, this is why this boy went out here and participated in this act of violence. Because when you take a critical look at his behavior, it was extremely feminine. Here you have a grown man who was going to get in a truck or a car to drive 9 hours to El Paso to go to a Walmart to participate in a mass shooting. However, this exact same male cannot get up off of his butt to drive 15, 25, or 30 minutes to a Walmart in his area to apply for a job. And that just shows you how deeply dysfunctional these beta males are. They can sit there and make all of these grand plans from their rose-colored perspective where they're going to participate in a mass shooting, but these men will not go out of their way to drive to a nearby local business to apply for a job. Moreover, these exact same men, they can save up a bunch of money to buy an AK-47 to murder innocent people, buy bullets to murder innocent people. But none of these exact same men will go out here and take that exact same money and invest it in resources that will help them build a business. And that shows you how deeply dysfunctional these beta males are. They'll sit there and talk about how Hispanics are replacing them, yet they have all of the tools and resources to build all of their own business and infrastructure to further perpetuate their so-called white races, but won't go out of their way to make those efforts to continue building on a foundation, to continue to perpetuate and build the so-called white race. So instead of him taking responsibility for himself, this beta male wanted to go out here and say, oh, it's the Hispanics that are the reason why I'm messed up. When again, when you look at his position in the world, he's sitting in his mother's house, he's on the internet all day, he's not working anywhere, and he's got money to spend $1,000, $2,000 on an AK-47, $500-$600 on those headphones, and even money to go buy all of these bullets, but he ain't got no money to go out here and start a landscaping business, which is a couple of $100s, or to start some other business like an eBay business that costs next to nothing. All of these resources and tools are right here for this Patrick Chrysius to start building himself up. But instead of him taking responsibility and accountability for himself, he's going to sit there and tell us that it's his responsibility to go after so-called Hispanics who are trying to replace white people, and he's supposed to go out here and stop this so-called race mixing. And this just shows you, again, how backwards your beta males truly are, and again, how cowardly they are, because he would rather go out here and try to go after a certain social and political cause, but he does not want to take responsibility for himself. Again, these are traits that boys from single mother households have. They want to go out here and they want to fight the world, but they don't want to take responsibility for themselves. So they want to go out here and take power by destroying other people's lives, but then they don't want to go out here and make the effort to go put into their own life. And the reason why they don't want to put that effort into their own life is primarily because these men are cowards. They lack a backbone, they lack stones, they lack courage, they lack discipline. And because they lack courage and discipline, this is why they can look at the plank in a Hispanic person's eye before taking the mote out of their own eye. And it just shows you how weak these guys, like your Patrick Chrysius, are, talking about how they're going to make things right with their AK-47 when they don't even have things in order about their own life. And that, again, shows you how deeply dysfunctional these beta males like this are. They're sitting there and they're not thinking about taking responsibility for themselves, but then they want to take responsibility for other people. Again, showing you how completely backwards these beta males are. And again, when I look at this beta male, I just see another textbook beta male, like I talk about in my book, The Man Crisis, a beta male who I possibly believe was fueled by your Donald Trump, who was sitting there, he was making all of these rallies and rhetoric, with all this rhetoric, and that's what really stirs up a lot of these beta males, and it stirred them up ever since the days of George Zimmerman. And I always believe that if Barack Obama had Eric Holder file federal civil rights charges against George Zimmerman, we wouldn't have seen a further escalation of these beta males. And we've seen this escalation again because, again, of these single mothers, and again, because of inaction by our government as related to these mass shooters. Moreover, we have not seen any sort of effort made to deal with the foundation of these mass shooters, which is this single mother household. And I believe, again, that no one wants to confront these white women, because to confront this white woman is to really, a lot of these white men fear confronting her, and they fear confronting her because they need her to perpetuate and promote white supremacy. So they don't want to solve this problem as related to these mass shooters, and this is why we see people continuing to talk around the problem of mass shooters, because in order to confront the problem of mass shooters, it means really holding women accountable for the way they have been raising boys, and then making efforts to reallocate resources so that we can make a heavy investment in men. And to invest in men, this is something that most men in America don't want to do, because that would alienate the majority of female voters and the female voting bloc, and it would alienate the large group of female workers. And corporate America primarily wants that large group of women workers because they want women who will follow the lead of the corporate bosses. So there's no real effort to try to change things as related to men. And because no one wants to change things as related to men, that's why we have beta males like this Patrick Chrysius participating in mass shootings. And we have men like your Patrick Chrysius buying into concepts like white supremacy, because these idle minds are the devil's workshop, and because no one wants to put these men to work. This is why these men are sitting here listening to rhetoric on these racist websites, and even watching these racist YouTube videos, or even listening to these Donald Trump rallies. They are sitting there idle, looking for somebody to be the blame, looking for somebody to be the scapegoat, and never once looking to take responsibility for their own lives, because as long as they have somebody to blame, they never have to take accountability for themselves. and they never have to take accountability for their situation. And what they never learn is that in a home is that they need to learn male life skills in order to survive, because most men who have male life skills understand they can't sit here and blame other people. They understand they have to take responsibility for themselves, and they have to start making a road for themselves. But that's not a skill boys are learning, primarily because we've had women raising men for the last 50 years. And what's really even scarier than this mass shooting is the fact that we have all the infrastructure in our society for more mass shootings to go on. And the reason why that is because Americans keep denying the core root of the problem, which is the way women have raised boys to become men here in America over the last 50 years. And we have people like your President Trump continuing to make excuses for those women instead of holding them accountable. And we continue to have people in America continuing to deny the problem, which is the way we have raised boys to become men, how we have raised boys to become these soft males, and how these soft males, they just don't have the discipline, character, and resolve to survive in the world, and how we have 2 to 3 generations of these ticking time bombs running around in our country. And what's scary is we don't know when these men will explode, what they will do when they explode, or what type of carnage they will participate in when they explode. And most Americans don't want to confront that ugly truth because they want to continue living in the world of rose-colored glasses instead of confronting the harsh reality that we have really done a poor job of raising boys to become men. These men are in crisis, and these men are a clear and present danger to American society. If you want to learn more about why men like Patrick Chrysius participate in mass shootings, you can pick up my book, The Man Crisis, on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle formats. You can also pick it up on Smashwords, the iBookstore, and you can Barnes & Noble and Google Play. And if you want to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.